Wherever the church goes, it takes with it development, sometimes through education or health. Many of the best schools in the world, Oxford, Yale, Harvard, were pioneered by clergymen. Harvard is in fact named after the Reverend John Harvard. Even in Nigeria, some of the most renowned schools like Hope Waddell in Calabar, CMS in Lagos were started by missionaries. But today, there's a lady who's establishing mission schools in indigent communities, and we'll be talking to her about evangelism through education. Welcome with me, Mrs. Nkoyo Rapu, the founder of Bethesda Agency, right? Did I get the name right?
Bethesda Child Support Agency, all the same.
Excellent, excellent. So, Bethesda has existed for almost 2 decades. And in that time, Bethesda has trained almost 5,000 children. Am I right?
Correct.
What led you into this work?
The word Bethesda means mercy. And I felt about 19 years ago that I was a product and am a product of God's mercy. And so I felt that I needed to give back to the community because God had been so gracious to me. And I actually asked him what he would have me do. And so Bethesda is born from that response where I felt that in a moment of intense crisis that I needed to look outward and bring hope to other people. And really that was what informed my decision. So in a way, Bethesda is a thanksgiving offering to God.
Excellent.
It's my way of saying, Lord, thank you for what you've done for me. And thank you for the mercy undeserving that I enjoy. And I would like to give back something rather than be introspective, to be a blessing to other people.
Okay, so Bethesda was born out of pain, in a sense, your own personal pain. And I know that you address the issue of unanswered prayers, for instance, in your book, The Gilded Cage.
Yes.
We'll come to that. But I know Bethesda started as scholarship first to children, and it has evolved. Tell us about that, please.
Okay. So we started off, it actually started with a need that arose in our church community, where a gentleman and his wife who had stumbled on very hard times, they'd lost their jobs and were waiting to just leave Nigeria. And they couldn't pay the school fees of their children. And one day after a service, my husband just introduced me to them and said, could you help this family out? And I realized that it didn't take much. The money didn't come from my pocket. I just simply used the goodwill and influence I had as a pastor in the church. And I walked up to a family, another family who were doing much better, and asked if they would sponsor these children by paying their school fees. And to my surprise and delight, it wasn't a difficult thing. And that gave me the impetus I needed to move forward. And we started off with just pairing people who could pay school fees with very indigent children who needed help.
Okay, and it has evolved from that to setting up schools?
Yes.
Tell us.
So the Sponsor a Child program essentially is scholarships offered to children who are in other schools. So that's how it started. Then a few years after, 2014 to be precise, it occurred to us, and when I say us, the committee of people who were working with me at the time, that our primary assignment was actually to disciple children, to bring in the influence of Christianity through education. I'm a product of missionary schools, and I'll go back to Nigeria of the past, which I hope would be Nigeria of the future. We mostly, 90% of people my age went through missionary schools. In the missionary schools, your personality was molded. You had confidence, integrity. You were brought up in certain fundamental principles of life. And you had such pride in your school that if you wore your school uniform, you were conscious that your school uniform spoke of the integrity and the principles, the abiding principles of your school, and the essence of the missionaries that set up the schools. So we grew up in that place. So I then felt that it was important to have moral authority over these children and be able to influence. Even though they were from very poor communities, it even meant that we needed to take them into schools where we had absolute control of what the influence over them.
So there's education, but also character development.
Character formation and development, yes. So
important.
that's why we set up the schools.
The schools. And now you have, Bethesda has how many schools and how many children?
We have 3 schools. We have one in Ikota. Ikota is a multi-tribal community in
Lagos,
of Lekki Ajah Express Road in Lagos. And we have one in Ijai Jokoro.
Okay.
That's really in the mainland.
Okay.
And then we have one in Matogun. Matogun is a community that exists between the really Ogun State but Lagos border.
Excellent. And I must also add, I didn't say in your introduction, apart from the fact that you're my sister, you're also a pastor. And you mentioned your husband. Your husband is a pastor, Pastor Tony Rapo, who's doing an incredible work in social reformation, apart from, directly pastoring a church. He's done so much more, being a medical doctor and a pastor. Is there something in your background? I'm sure people would like to know why education.
Yes, why education? I studied law, but my passion is actually education. And I'm glad I discovered my passion. I enjoyed law for the few years I practiced, but my satisfaction and fulfillment has come from education. My mother, well, as you know, the school is still running. It's about 42 years old, Springfield Nursery and Primary School.
Now secondary as well.
Now secondary in
Port
Port Harcourt.
Yeah.
And I remember that the school started with a handful of children on the veranda, as we called it in those days. And I watched her raise those children, students from the veranda into now what is a school and a nursery and secondary school. I also recall that my grandfather was a product of Hope Waddell. Yeah. And the missionary influence along the coastal region.
Yeah, with people like Mary
Slessor, which was the
Reverend Hope Waddell, who came from Jamaica.
Yes, and Reverend McGregor was the principal of Hope Waddell at the time when our grandfather was in
Hope Waddell school.
So, and then as I said, I'm a product of missionary schools. So I saw that the Catholics, through the influence of school hospitals, were able to bring a lot of change to community and provide people with what I refer to as the gift of opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity. And I know you had the opportunity to talk to students at Harvard University about Bethesda. How was that experience? And what did you tell them?
The invitation came through the instrumentality of Professor Jacob Olupono and Ngozi Enelama. She had been watching the Bethesda model. I think she'd visited our school, and she called me and I said, I'm a pastor. I don't know what you want me to say in Harvard. And she said, I've observed this model and there is something there. The professor would speak, but we need a social entrepreneur who has done it over time.
Hands-on.
Hands-on. Come and tell us how it evolved. It was a nice experience.
As I can imagine. And your family life, how do you, because I know you're a wife of a very busy man. You're a pastor, you're a lawyer, you have 3 children. How do you manage to juggle all these balls?
The secret is being in his secret place. I have found out over the years that the more I can stay in God's presence, the more the Holy Spirit helps me to adjust my priorities And that changes from time to time. I tell you that's really what
That
it is. It's
But-
simple, but I hope it comes out as profound. That what I'm able to do is purely by the grace of God and by just sitting at his feet.
So we'll take a break now.
Okay.
So I've been talking to Pastor Nkoyo Rapu about the job she's doing through the Bethesda Agency to touch lives of children in indigent communities through education. Stay with us. My guest on this edition of Colors of Life is a woman of many parts. Lawyer, pastor, social reformer, and all that. And she says the secret of the things she's able to do is dwelling in the secret place of the Most High. So join us as we continue our conversation. I know you, so I know that just that very strong and intimate connection with God is so important. So I can attest that indeed that's the secret of what you do. But on the practical, after God, what else accounts for the success of Bethesda?
Good. We have a strong board. We have about 16 board members. 16 because now we've added to our numbers the younger generation, and the board is divided into subcommittees, and so it makes it much easier, and they're quite hands-on, so it makes it much easier to run the organization, and it has allowed for stability and continuity. Okay. So if we have a building project, it goes to the building committee. Okay. If we have an HR problem or challenge, it goes to the HR. And these are competent people in their own areas of influence and in the corporate environment. So they bring all the skills, experience to bear on the project.
Okay.
I also have a very hardworking, intelligent, resourceful program director, Ijoma. Okay. And that also is an important factor. We also try to cater to the welfare. We have low staff turnover. So we also try to cater to the welfare of our staff. So most of them would be at least 7 years in the organization.
The system. That's so
that
impressive.
has also helped.
Okay, and then there's a question I'm sure many people would want to know. What happens after graduation? Because I know the school is primary and secondary.
Yes, and secondary is actually just up to JS3.
Okay.
Because we are limited with infrastructure and really couldn't afford, at least not for now, going into senior secondary school, which requires labs and all that. So we've thought that at least initially it was to end with the primary school. Yeah. But then we thought primary school is kind of like neither here nor there. You are not, okay. It's just very limiting. You're not giving them an opportunity to stand on their own. So what we've done is after secondary school, after JS3, some of them, the sponsors go on, we send them to schools that we're affiliated to.
Okay, and their sponsors keep on paying
their school fees.
Okay, and I know that, when COVID-19 came this year, things changed for everyone.
I know.
And schools had to go digital. But I can imagine, how did that work for Bethesda?
It threw us off balance in the first 1 month and perhaps I think about 6 weeks, because these children are from extremely poor homes where there's no electricity. There's just a little cubicle made from a bamboo that the children exist in. And so for me, it was very distressing. But then we took up the challenge and went back to the drawing board to see what we could do. And what we came up with was to have them observe protocol and on appointment basis come into the compound, schools still locked. But the teachers handed over packs to the students, 2 weeks, to their schoolwork for 2 weeks. And then we had a system where maybe just 5 families, 5 parents come in, pick up the packs, social distance and all, and go back home.
Okay.
When lockdown was eased up, we then devised the method of teaching them in any available space, under trees, 6 children. So we took school to the community.
Wow.
And outdoor, so under a
Okay.
tree. And because the schools really are beneficial to the community,
Okay, I was
the
going to ask about
parents-
that partnership with
Yes.
the community, your
Yes.
relationship.
the parents appreciate what we are doing, and they came all out to help. Remember at this time that shops were closed, bars were closed, churches were closed. So people offered us space, outdoor space. And one of our
Alumni?
no, one of our sponsors
Okay.
donated about 100
Whiteboards?
whiteboards.
You said so.
And this is what we just attached to sticks and to
In
plywood
the communities.
and used in the communities. And
But I can imagine that you'll need more teachers. So where did more teachers come from if you have clusters of 6?
yes, we actually had 73 clusters in the 3 communities where schools exist.
Okay.
And we had volunteers, volunteers from our past students who are alumni,
Okay.
and also from members of, we have a very viable volunteer base,
Okay.
database of volunteers.
Okay.
And you know, Nigerians are amazing. I have to say that whenever there's a need and they can see a channel where they can express or channel benevolence,
Yes.
they are very magnanimous. So we had people from our volunteer base who had been sponsoring these children and just wanted to see the children continue
Their
in their education
education.
and not lose grounds.
Okay.
So that's how we survived the storm.
Amazing. And then
Yes.
practically, what do you do practically to disciple the children in the Christian faith?
We have devotionals which we use, and your devotional
And I
is
have a
really,
testimony about
you
that. I'm
do
going
it.
to share it here.
Please. Your devotional is one of the ones we use. And at assembly, the children have devotions.
Okay.
And then when they go into their classrooms, the devotional is actually used like a class.
Okay.
So it's like Bible study.
Study. Okay.
And
In
it's
the classroom.
compulsory. It's
Okay.
compulsory.
Amazing.
We make the people understand that from the beginning, that we'll take your child in, but we would shape the belief system of the child in a positive way that makes the child a better member of the community.
Fantastic. And I can imagine that they really understand how important
And
that
appreciate it.
Yes, and that's why there's such partners to what you're doing. So I'll tell you my testimony. It was earlier on in this year, 2020. We went on evangelism from our church, and I didn't know where we were going, my husband and I, and 2 other people in the church. We drove to this community anyway, and we step into what I would call like a shanty town, just a settlement of
Yes.
wooden structures,
yes.
bamboo, zinc. And as I descend from the plank into the community,
Yeah.
this girl must be about 14, came smiling at me, and I was wondering, why is she smiling at me? And she said, "Are you Coco Kalango?" And I'm like, how? How does she know me? And then she goes into her hut and comes out with my devotional, and she shows the devotional to me.
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
oh my God. So that started a whole,
Yes.
she went and brought her mom, her twin sister. And I asked, how did you get my devotional? And she said, I attend Bethesda School. And I remember someone had bought copies of my devotional for all the children in the
Yes,
school.
yes.
And she said the devotional had been such a blessing. So I can attest. I've seen
Thank you.
an example of a child whose life was changed. And the mom had her own story as well, because the entire family used the
devotional.
the Colors of Life devotional.
That's very rewarding to know, because the family uses the devotional.
Yes, so it's
Yes.
gone much further than just the child in Bethesda,
Yes.
because I can imagine this is going on in other places. We'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll talk about the future of Bethesda and so much more.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us as we've been discussing about the work of the Bethesda Child Support Agency with Mrs. Nkoyo Rapu. We'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll wrap up this discussion. On this edition of Colors of Life, I'm still talking to Pastor Nkoyo Rapu, lawyer and founder of the Bethesda Child Support Agency. She's also an author. So join me in welcoming her again.
Thank you.
I've talked about your book, The Gilded Cage, that deals with the issue of unanswered prayers. And I have another book in my hand, Shiny Statues, Take a Stand and Shine for God. You have dedicated this book to our father. Let me read the dedication page. My dear father and mentor, late Justice P.O.E. Bassi, who left me an exemplary pattern of life to follow. So tell us about that pattern of life, which you cover in the Shiny Statues.
Okay. The Shiny Statues deals with the issue of, I would say, maybe peer pressure.
Okay.
It encourages people through personal stories that I have told to stand firm in a constantly changing world, to have the courage to toe the road less traveled. And I dedicated it to my father because that's what I think I have learned primarily from him. The philosophy, the pattern of life that says you don't have to follow the crowd and you are not what you own. You are what you believe. And that the world is looking for leaders, not followers. Yeah. But to be a leader, and he demonstrated that by his personal lifestyle. To be a leader, he always said to me, success in life is the ability to adapt to change successfully.
Fantastic.
In other words, if you find yourself to be a millionaire, act like one. If you find yourself to not have the same means, still act like you were one. In other words, be confident in
wherever you find yourself.
Wherever you find yourself is success in life.
Excellent. And I'm sure that foundation has been so instrumental in the work that you do. And back to,
I want to say something. I find that to be biblical. You know, Paul said, in all things I have learned to be content. I've learned to abase, and I've learned to abound.
Thank you. So we're just going to talk about the future of Bethesda. I know you've just started a Skills Acquisition Center. Tell us about that briefly.
Yeah. We had to start I have a philosophy which in life, I say to myself, in a crisis, I think going through the Bible is also a wonderful time to move forward. So in the COVID crisis, I thought to myself, why sit here? The leper said, why sit here and die? Move forward.
Okay.
Move forward. So we found out that I would go to the shops, supermarket, around the area where I live and where the school is situated. And I'll find children who've left the Bethesda school as supermarket attendants. And at least they had a job.
Yeah.
But I felt that the assignment was incomplete unless I could bring them to the place, we could bring them to the place where they can earn an income. And so on the 1st of September, we started a Skills Acquisition Center.
Amazing. And what are the sort of skills that you
Well, because of the limitation of COVID and our determination to stick to the protocol, we started sewing.
Okay.
Which means each child has a desk, a table, and a machine. So that allowed for distancing. And so we currently are teaching sewing and then photography.
Okay.
And I take 2 classes, Tuesday and Thursdays. What we do is, my class is on lifestyle.
Okay.
The idea is to graduate the young people as artisans and people with skills who have integrity, hard work, and excellence.
Amazing. I'm sure people are wondering, how is the work of Bethesda funded? And people may be listening who want to be part of this support. So how does Bethesda work get funded?
I need a lot of money to get it
I'm
going.
sure you do.
To do as much as I dream and see.
Okay.
But essentially now what we do, we have people who sponsor the children in our schools, which is to say they pay for the administrative costs to keep a child in school.
Mm-hmm.
That administrative cost goes to paying teachers, materials, etc. for the school. And then we have gone from there to those sponsors who work in organizations, corporate, non-corporate entrepreneurs who have formed network of people because they've seen the work, they believe in it, they've gone out to form networks or to introduce us to their own network, which will be some network in companies, some old boys, alumni, school alumni, organizations or alumni. And then those people have eventually introduced us to the corporate affairs department in the companies.
Yes.
And when the companies find out that you have accountability in place, we have found out that it's not been very difficult to convince them.
Funding.
We've also been funded primarily, I must say, by individuals in the body of Christ and in the church that we pastor. They have also they felt that it's their Christian responsibility to promote social work.
I know you're now into crowdfunding as well.
Yes, as we found out that it was also getting, quite a challenge at different times to raise, then we've gone now to crowdfunding.
I'm so sorry we've run out of time. I'd have loved to continue talking about this, and I know you're so passionate. We could go on and on. So this is where we end this edition of Colors of Life, where we've been talking to Mrs. Rapu, founder of the Bethesda Schools, on her work in touching children, changing lives, introducing Christ to them through education. Remember to like us, follow us on social media. Please share this video. This is the Colors of Life show, where we seek to know Christ and to make Christ known.